Breaking news. Of course, sources familiar with the matter saying that President Zelenskyy of Ukraine is backing the proposal to halt energy asset strikes and has discussed a partial ceasefire in a call with President Trump, who has said that Ukraine is on track after that call. We're going to now bring in Kailey Leinz in Washington, D.C., of course, our Balance of Power co-host. What do we know?
Well, this is per a person who is familiar with the more than hour-long discussion, or roughly hour-long discussion, President Trump had with President Zelenskyy by phone earlier today. Essentially, what is key here is that in order for a ceasefire of any kind to be effective, both sides need to agree to it. And while President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to a 30-day ceasefire on energy and infrastructure strikes, Ukraine needed to get on board. And that, according to this source, is what has happened here. Ukrainian President Zelenskyy said he, too, will agree not to strike Russian energy infrastructure. So this is a step forward, though, of course, this is still just a partial ceasefire. Trump and Zelenskyy, according to this source, have agreed to work toward a broader ceasefire, as was discussed as well with President Putin yesterday. And President Trump said in the readout of, or the White House said in the readout of that call with Putin, that those discussions on a wider ceasefire would begin immediately. Now, President Trump also promised in a True Social post earlier today, in which he described his call with Zelenskyy this morning as being good and that things were on track, said that we should expect to get a more detailed readout of the call from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. So we could still very well get further detail from the administration as to what exactly this ceasefire when it comes to energy and infrastructure will look like, what else was discussed, when exactly the talks will take place, and where in the Middle East. Those details we are yet awaiting, but we do know some agreement was made between the Ukrainian side through Zelenskyy and President Trump today. Sonali.
Yeah, Kailey, to stick on this just a little longer, what does this mean in terms of the turn in relations between President Trump and President Zelenskyy, given what we saw really just weeks ago at the White House?
Well, certainly this is a positive sign that their relationship is warming once again. As yes, the last time they had spoken directly for a length of time was in the Oval Office, when things obviously went way off the rails and ended up with the Ukrainian president leading without signing a minerals deal that was intended to be signed at that meeting. That deal still hasn't been signed, I would point out, but this certainly is a step forward in the two sides maintaining the relationship and maintaining these discussions. Ukraine, obviously, through this phone call with President Zelenskyy, is having a seat at the table in the way these conversations are moving forward, as President Trump kind of acts as a mediator between the Ukrainian side and the Russian side. And President Trump said today, really the primary purpose of this is to align what he called both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. He very much sees himself as a deal maker here and is clearly willing to deal with Zelenskyy even after the events of a few weeks ago. Sonali.
Kailey, because all of this is coming pretty quickly and there is much more ahead, telegraph what's next to expect. You had mentioned that there are going to be more readouts from both calls.
Yep. So we'll look for that readout from the White House or through the State Department or the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, as President Trump did promise more detail on the discussion that took place today is coming. And the details we will be looking for really do regard those next steps. As President Trump yesterday said that there will be immediate conversations to expand this ceasefire beyond just energy and infrastructure, that those conversations will take place in the Middle East. It's a question of who will be the representatives from all three of these sides in those conversations. When and where will they be held, and just how quickly, realistically, is the timeline for a fuller ceasefire? Keeping in mind that Steve Witkoff, who, of course, is President Trump's special envoy, told our colleagues on Bloomberg Surveillance earlier this morning he thinks it could be a matter of weeks. Sonali.